Well, South Africa has always been invited as a partner to G7 summits. And this year, Germany invited us, and we were particularly pleased to come and participate. And our participation this year happens during real serious challenges that are facing the world: the COVID pandemic, climate change, as well as the conflict between Russia and the Ukraine. And so those issues pretty much dominated the discussions at the G7. And being here together with the chair of the African Union, we together represented the African Union and our continent, and we were able to make inputs on all the issues. The first issue, of course, for us was in some ways to reflect on the path that we had traversed together with India and many other countries on the issue of the TRIPS waiver at the WTO, where we argued against the views that were expressed by many G7 countries, and finally got them to concede that there should be a waiver. So in a way, we were somewhat celebrating the success of having achieved a TRIPS waiver, and they conceded that we had represented the developing economies rather well. But we also felt we should use that as a foundation for the further discussions that are going to take place, and warn them that we want to see concessions when we come to discuss the issue of therapeutics and diagnostics, which the WTO is going to handle in 6 months. And we argued that we want to see them making concessions so that countries in the developing economies should be able to make diagnostics and therapeutics, so that we don't only end up with making vaccines. We also argued that we want them, as G7 countries, together with their various associations, to buy vaccines that are made in Africa for their own environments, as well as for other African countries who they may donate to. They conceded that that was a very good development that they should move in. So we were very pleased that when it comes to issues of vaccines, diagnostics, and therapeutics, we put forward a very convincing case. But we also spoke about the pandemic preparedness that the world should now have, so that the world should be prepared, but more particularly our own continent. So we touched on issues of health and the solidarity that can be pledged by your G7 countries to assist Africa through to improving health systems, so that we are better prepared for future pandemics. Then we also discussed the issue of climate change. They recognize, the G7 countries recognize that many developing economy countries are not responsible for the terrible carbon emissions that have led to climate change. And they recognize that they have a responsibility and also need to pledge solidarity to assist us as we traverse towards renewable energy type of economic development, and that they need to make funding available. They recognized that in the Paris COP that happened in Paris, they did not live up to their commitments to provide funding for developing economies, so that we can begin to mitigate the adverse effects of climate change. And of course, we also recognized the deal that was made in COP26, and that the negotiations are now underway with regard to the $8.5 billion that has been made available for South Africa. Germany added another 300 million euros that they said they'll make available. So negotiations are still going to ensue as to exactly what that package means for us. But we made it clear to them that we will only be able to embark on a transition to make sure that the jobs of our workers, mine workers, are not adversely affected, and the communities that live in and around mining towns are also not adversely affected. So we need to manage the transition very well, and it needs to be done within a time frame that will enable us to accede to renewable energy trajectory, particularly as we begin to embrace new technologies such as hydrogen, such as fuel cells, and so that we need to work together with our people in full consultation so that no one is ever left behind. We also had a wonderful discussion, I would say, on the issue of gender equality, empowerment of women. This is a concept which I now believe has now been properly embraced, even by G7 countries. We had a presentation from the Gender Equality Advisory Council, which is coming out with a very good report. But the important thing that they raised was that we need to mainstream the whole issue of gender equality and also begin to look at gender budgeting and inculcate it in our gender budgeting processes. This, for us as South Africa, means a lot because we've been grappling with the issue of how we begin to have gender budgeting within our whole budget architecture. So that was good. The last important issue we discussed was food security, particularly in the light of the Russia-Ukraine conflict, where there are now food shortages. Food prices have gone up. There's a shortage of fertilizer, and the cereals and the grains that Russia and Ukraine produce are not getting through, and this has led to huge shortages, and prices have gone up for many developing economy countries. The United Nations Secretary General explained exactly the efforts that he has been involved in to open the channels so that the grain and the cereals and the fertilizers that come from Russia and the Ukraine can begin to be exported to various parts of the world. We thought the report was very positive and that it would be very helpful when that happens. But we also started looking at another proposition, which is making countries that are reliant on fertilizers from Russia and also from the Ukraine to be self-sufficient. And we're now going to work on a proposition, on a proposal that we hope will be supported by the G7 countries. Certainly one or two of them said they would support the proposition to make developing economy countries on the African continent to be more self-reliant. So we are going to work on a proposal that is similar to the one we worked on with vaccines. We want African countries to be self-reliant when it comes to fertilizer production, and we are going to be working with the G7 countries to see how best we can reach that level. I'm particularly pleased and excited about this prospect that we should improve fertilizer production on our continent so as to secure food security. Because if we want to secure food security, be it grains, be it any other type of food commodity, it is fertilizer that will make us reach that high level. So we are going to work on a proposition because Africa must now begin to produce its own fertilizers. We must become economically independent when it comes to food security. And so much as this conflict, the silver lining is that it could actually make us wake up and begin to produce our own fertilizers to secure our own food security. Thank you.